Are you ready to mention some of the methods and approaches of learning English? So let's begin. Let's begin. The purpose of this presentation is to show you the audiolingual method. Keep this in mind to learn or to talk about the audiolingual method, okay? But before we begin talking about the audiolingual method, let's begin talking about the approaches. There are several approaches, which came to this audiolingual method, which you will be using when you are teaching the ALC material. So let's see. Let's begin. For example, you have been assigned to teach English in your military language school, for example, in your anywhere where you are, and you are teaching the ALC material. Just for you to know, this is audiolingual method. Audiolingual. You know what? The ALCPT tells you that this is audiolingual. Why? Because you have 60 questions for listening, and that's the key. That's the proof that you are teaching audiolingual method, although they want to have some nuances of communicative method. In fact, this is audiolingual, and this is for you. If you have been assigned to teach English, I want just you to get familiar with some of these methods and approaches. Are you guys ready? Let's get started. We'll be talking about the approaches and methods in language teaching, and just for you to remember, let's see. Let me put this in order. Okay. Uh, Remember, there are approaches and methods in language teaching. Okay. So you learn these subjects if you if you take a teacher's diploma course, or whatever you are, or wherever and whatever you are taking, but related to language teaching. In this approach, look at this. An approach is a way of looking at teaching and learning. Okay, that's what we will be talking about. Approach is a way of looking at teaching and learning, and then that's an approach. And of course, it is a theoretical view of what language is, and of how it can be learned. This is important. Okay, this is a theoretical view, and how can it can be learned. You see, that's important. So then an approach gives rise to methods, the way of teaching something, which use classroom activities or techniques to help learners learn. So that's why we'll be talking about approaches. Okay, that's interesting. That's why, and you might be assigned to teach English. So this is just for you to remember. And let's begin with the first, at least the first, which have been registered in history. And let's say, for example, the first approach is grammar translation method. Grammar translation method. So this was the most popular and widely used method for language teaching between the ages, you see, 1840 to 1940. So that's the grammar translation. This method of teaching, it was just translation. It was kind of boring. So this method was used for teaching and learning Latin. So that's why it's because the only thing they wanted is the translation of Latin, and it places a lot of emphasis on learning vocabulary, you see, vocabulary and grammar. That's why sometimes when you learn English or when you teach English, if you are traditional, so don't be traditional, first of all, but if you are traditional, you are looking for the learning of vocabulary by your students, vocabulary and grammar, vocabulary and grammar, vocabulary and grammar, in such a way that at the very end of the course, they just memorize, and that's not so good, is not so fun. But anyway, so it was the first one, grammar translation. So that doesn't mean that it's bad, okay? That doesn't mean that it's not a good method, but you need to combine it. Then, just for you to know, just for your information, the direct method comes, and then this was the outcome of the reaction against the grammar translation method. As you remember, many people, many experts, scholars, they said and they opposed to the grammar translation method. They say no more grammar translation. So they came out with, the direct method came out. And the characteristics of this direct method is giving instructions exclusively in target language. You see, giving instructions exclusively in the language you are teaching. So sometimes it might be confusing when you have some basic students. Grammar was taught inductively, you see. So that's why grammar, it was not, kind of addressed or exposed, fully exposed. So it was inductive. Then teaching everyday vocabulary and sentences, teaching everyday vocabulary and sentences every single day. That's the direct method. Then you have an oral approach or situational language teaching. This method, children use whatever hearing they get from their surroundings. So this is usually for children. They also take help from the context. The context is very helpful to understand and use language. So this is just like children playing. So they get what, any sound in their surroundings, and they learn. They are just like sponges, so they get everything from their surroundings. And that's the oral or situational. And the characteristics, just for you to know the characteristics of this approach, is language teaching. For example, language teaching begin with spoken language. Spoken language, not written, not reading, but spoken. The target language is the language of the classroom. Yes, be attentive right here. Target language, okay, is the language of the classroom. So if you're teaching English, English should be used in the classroom, no Spanish at all. So language points are introducing and practice based on situation. These language points are introducing or introduced, they should say, and practiced based on situation. That's why it's situational. Okay, then those language points, for example, grammar and vocabulary and whatever you want to teach, you need to teach them based on situations, not just alone. Okay, as you see here, we have the audiolingual method. After what? After oral or situational language teaching came out audiolingual method. And I want you to pay attention, to pay close attention to this audiolingual method. You know why? Because you are taught, you are instructed to teach English. So I'm talking to you, teacher, maybe from the armed forces. If you are assigned to teach English, you need this, because the method you will be using for teaching the ALC, or that's the American Language Course materials, you will be using audiolingual method. So that's why this presentation is just for you to get familiar with some other methods, but the one you need to pay close attention to is this one, is the audiolingual method. So check the characteristics of this audiolingual method. This material is presented in a dialogue form. You see, dialogue form. There is no dependence on mimicry. You see, memorization of set phrases, and overlearning. So that's the characteristics. You see, memorization, overlearning. That's why sometimes it's kind of boring. But anyway, that's the way, that's the method. Structural patterns are taught using repetitive drills. You will be tired of drills. I mean, your students will be tired of drills. And you know what? I put this backwards. You know why? Because usually when you have a long sentence, you have to divide it and to begin from the end, saying, for example, Linda plays in the garden with their brothers and sisters. And then you begin with their brothers and sisters, and people repeat. I mean, your students repeat with their brother, with her brothers and sisters, and then plays in the garden. So they are reading backwards. And speech, in this case, the audiolingual method, speech is above written language. So speech is what matters right now here in the audiolingual method. There's a little or no grammatical explanation. You see, that's why it's difficult. And that's why in this channel, my YouTube channel, I explain in Spanish the 30 books. You know why? Because when a very basic student, or they are called true beginners, open their books in the middle, they don't understand any single word. That's why I explain the vocabulary and the grammar in Spanish. You know why? For them to understand and then go immediately to their exercises, because the listening, the English listening, they have it in their hands, in their computers, in their USB. So that's why they need to understand first very quickly. So that's why I explain this in Spanish. Once they understand, they go immediately to their exercises. And so because they have little or no grammar explanation. Great importance to pronunciation. This is important. I think this is important. You know why? Because pronunciation is an issue. Pronunciation is an issue. So that's why this audiolingual method gives great importance to pronunciation. Very little use of mother tongue by teachers. This is very interesting. Very little. They don't say no. They don't say no use of mother tongue. They say very little use of mother tongue by teachers. What does this mean? Well, it means that you can use your L1 in an L2 classroom, but this must be judicious. You have to use it judiciously. So I want you to pay attention to these characteristics. Then, of course, I told you, pay close attention to this audiolingual, because in the next video, I will talking about it, because you will be teaching. If you are a teacher, you are assigned as a teacher, you will be using audiolingual method. Then comes the communicative language teaching. It was actually developed in the opposition of the audiolingual method. Okay, so some experts, some scholars came out and say, okay, we oppose to the audiolingual method. We don't want any more memorization, any more mechanization. So we need more kind of learning. So this focuses on drilling and memorization. Excuse me. This audiolingual method focuses on drilling and memorization. Do you remember that? Do you remember that I told you that the audiolingual is drilling and drilling and drilling and drilling? So that makes memorization. So they memorize. Communicative language teaching, this, then the one we are talking right now about right now, it focuses on developing the ability of communication in learners in real life situations. This is important. I like this. In real life situations. So that's why it's communicative language teaching. It focuses on meaning rather than accuracy. You see, meaning rather than accuracy. So that's important. Just for you to know. Then comes total physical response. You know what? This total physical response, or TPR, is a language teaching method developed by James Asher. Okay, this is a famous guy, a professor emeritus of psychology at San Jose State University. It is based on the coordination of language and physical movement. So in this case, you give some instructions to your students and they just do it. They just do it. That's why it's total physical response. In TPR, instructors, you see here, instructors give commands to students in the target language. Fíjate, pay attention. I was about to tell you, fíjate. So in this case, in the target language, you give instructions. For example, close the door, mop, sweep the floor. You know, many examples. You just giving instructions and they doing it. That's why they respond totally physical. That's why it's total physical response. With body, look at this. Target language with body movements, and students respond with the whole body actions. You see, so they stand up. You may just with mimicry, you just sign, for example, the action you want to do. You want them to do. So you with the kind of mimics or mimicry, and then they have to understand what you want. They have to stand up and they have to do it with their whole body actions. Okay, so that's the PR, total physical response. Then the silent way. I mean, this is not for my mood. I don't like this silent. But anyway, just for you to know, this method emphasizes learner autonomy and active student participation. Silence is used as a tool. You see, silence is used as a tool to achieve this goal. The teacher uses a mixture of silence and gestures to focus students' attention, to elicit responses from them, and to encourage them to correct their own errors. So you see, you just point to the whiteboard or the blackboard, and then they correct maybe their pronunciation or maybe their grammar. So they correct, but you don't say any single word. You use silence as a tool, just pointing. Maybe you point to the past tense and they say, oh, okay, that's past tense. Or to the pronunciation. That's the way they use they. I have never used silence because silent or silence is not my my dish. They say my dish, my favorite stuff. So, but for you, it might be. So just for you to know, there's something called silent way, and there's a tool for teaching. Then comes communicative language learning. This emphasizes the sense of community in the learning group, encourages interaction as a vehicle for learning. You see, that's why it's communicative. Why? Why communicative? Because it's interaction as a vehicle for learning and considers as a priority the students' feelings. You see, students' feelings and recognition of struggles in language acquisition. So you have to be very aware of your students' feelings. So please do that. There is no syllabus or textbook. This is very interesting. You see, no syllabus or textbook to follow. It is the students themselves who determine the content of the lesson by means of meaningful conversations in which they discuss real messages. Man, this is kind of interesting. You know what? But you need to be in the mood too. You need to be in the mood to teach this communicative language learning. You know why? Because then you need to use your imagination. Remember that the sky is the limit. So you use your imagination. What for? For meaningful conversation. Otherwise, it's not so successful. Then comes suggestopedia. Suggestopedia comes from suggestion and pedagogy, or psychology, or whatever you want to match or to combine. Suggestopedia is a teaching method which is based on a modern understanding of how the human brain works. You see how human brain works and how we learn more effectively. You see, this is kind of interesting. You know why? Because then you are talking about your brain, about how it learns. The key elements of this suggestopedia is a rich sensory learning environment, just like pictures, color, music, etc. You see, rich sensory learning environment. So, a positive expectation of success, and the use of a varied range of methods, dramatic text, music, active participation in songs and games. Look at this, songs and games. It's nice. You might have a nice class if you use Suggestopedia, but not for you. If I'm talking to you, if you are assigned in the armed forces to teach English, so you will be using what? You remember? You will be using the Audiolingual Method. Don't lose track of it. Then comes the communicative approach. This is nice because, in fact, that's what we need the language for. We need it for communication. So it is based on the idea that learning language successfully comes through having to communicate real meaning. When learners are involved in real communication, their natural strategies for language acquisition will be used. You see, when they are involved in real communication. You see, real communication. Their natural strategies for language acquisition will be used, of course, and this will allow them to learn to use the language. So you will be using communication, but please use it real. It couldn't be a hypothetical situation, must be real for them to, be attentive and interested. So with this, I want you just to give you a small introduction about the approaches for teaching English, because I'm sure that if you are in the armed forces, you are just ordered. You receive the order to teach English, because if you speak English, so you are expected to teach English. So your superiors will order you to teach. So this is just for you to know other methods, other approaches, and you can combine them. Don't worry about it. There's something like eclectic method in which you combine everything just for the benefit of the learning of your students. So just don't forget, in the next video, I will talk to you about the Audiolingual Method, which is the one you will be using in your classroom. So please don't forget the Audiolingual Method, and see you in the next video. I will be talking to you in the next video.